This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Hi. So this is our last year before the Yom Tov of Shavuos. I want to speak about an interesting feature of Shavuos. We know there's no particular mitzvah to Shavuos anymore, midoraisa. In fact, if you look in the Chumash, Shavuos is referred to as a Chag HaBikurim or a Chag HaShavuos, but that's it. And if you look in the Mishnah, Shavuos is given a new name. What is Shavuos called in the Mishnah? It's called Atzeres. So it's interesting. It's called Atzeres in the Mishnah, but it's not called Atzeres in the Chumash. What day is called Atzeres in the Chumash? Shmini Atzeres. So what does Atzeres mean? Why is Shavuos not called Atzeres in the Chumash, and yes, called Atzeres in the Mishnah? So Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky says, very simple. What does the word Atzeres mean? Atzeres means Otzur min Malacha. You know how to do Malacha. So every other Yom Tov, we have a much better name for the Yom Tov, because Yom Tovim usually have mitzvahs. So for instance, on Sukkot, there's a mitzvah of Sukkah, so we'll call it Sukkot. Pesach, there's a mitzvah. Every Yom Tov has a mitzvah to it, and therefore it's more than just a day that you don't do Malacha. A day that has no distinguishing feature other than the fact that you don't do Malacha, we have no choice, we have to call it Atzeres. So let's say the last day of Sukkot, there are no mitzvahs, midoraisa, so therefore we call it Atzeres. But Shavuos we would never call Atzeres, because Shavuos has a mitzvah. What's the mitzvah of Shavuos? L'shtei halechem. But that's only Bisman Beis HaMikdash Hayakayim. Once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so there are no more karbanos, Mamela Shavuos is relegated to be called Atzeres. However, despite the fact that there are no particular mitzvahs to perform on Shavuos, nevertheless, the Kriyas HaTorah for Shavuos are much more colorful than any other time of the year. You have different types of Kriyas HaTorah, different Negunim, different tropes. You have Megillas Rus, you have Akdamus, you have Yetziv Pisgam, and what we're going to discuss today is a very innovative pshat in what is Yetziv Pisgam. What are we trying to accomplish? If I can have that Chumash for a moment, by saying Yetziv Pisgam. The Yetziv Pisgam is the piyut which is inserted on the Haftarah of the second day of Shavuos. We read from the Navi Chavakuk, and after the Tfilah l'Chavakuk HaNaviyah Shigyaina Yis Yetziv Pisgam, right? We insert it after the first pasuk. Now, before we start, many people don't even know what the tune is. They ruin the tune. And then people destroy it. They go low part again. What? No, it's a song, right? So so there's a high part, there's a low part, and there's a high part. And it goes back and forth. And the final stanza of Yetziv Pisgam is Yehoina son, Gevarin v'son, B'chem namtilei apirin. So that's the end of Yetziv Pisgam. And we talk about an individual by the name of Yehoina son. Who's Yehoina son? Why are we talking about him? Why are we giving him apirin? Why are we giving him credit? Why are we're giving him a shkoyach, right? We say to Yehoina son, Yehoina son, we're giving a shkoyach, we're giving apirin to Yehoina son. Who is Yehoina son? Why do we talk about him on the Haftarah of the second day of Shavuos? So let's talk a little bit about Akdamus for a moment. Why do we say Akdamus? Akdamus is also a piyut, which we say on the first day by the Kriyas HaTorah, the first day. Now, in terms of the Kriyas HaTorah, there's a piyut on the first day Kriyas HaTorah. In terms of the Haftarah, there's a piyut on the second day. You know, why that? Why don't you have a piyut the second day Kriya? Why don't you have a piyut the first day Haftarah? And, interestingly, Akdamus we say before the Aliyah, right? Akdamus, and then after we're done with Akdamus, right? How does Akdamus end? Roimim hu alen mekanma basra, meroimim hu alokim mekanma basra isa tzvi v'srevan v'sarlan oiraisa Okay, and then the kohen makes the bracha and he gets the aliyah. So the kohen is not mafsik in between his bracha and the kriyas haTorah. When it comes to Yetziv Pisgam, you lay in the first two psukim. Fine. So why by the haftarah are we mafsik and by the regular kriya we're not mafsik? So I have a very interesting sefer. The name of the sefer is there's no name. The sefer has no name. But if you open it up, you have writing in it. I don't know whose writing this is. This is a sefer I think my grandfather brought over from Europe. It was written by the brother of Rav Meir Shapiro. It's called Zichroin Meir, and it's a book of commemoration of Rabbi Yehuda Meir Shapiro. It's a memorial book for Rav Meir Shapiro, and it's mostly Divrei Torah for Rav Meir Shapiro. And in the beginning of the book, it's a very interesting book. Somebody big wrote things in it. I don't know who, but okay. And in the beginning of the book, you have L'Kavod Rav Meir Shapiro, a Dvar Torah from the father of Rav Meir Shapiro. One Dvar Torah, and this Dvar Torah is about Yetziv Pisgam and Akdamus. So this is what we have on our sheet. Rav Meir Shapiro's father, Rabbi Yaakov Shimshon Shapira Shatz. So he points out that in the period of Yetziv Pisgam and the Haftarah of the second day of Shavuos, we conclude Yehoina son, Gavarin v'son, B'chein namtile apirin. And he asks, V'hu peli, mihu Yoina son, U'ma'in Yoina lekan. Who's Yoina son? And what's he doing in the shul the second day of Shavuos? How did he get into the shul? So he says as follows. V'hinei b'taz archaim, siman tav tzad yidal huva. It's brought in the Taz. Shaya minog hakodom likroi b'yom aleph d'shvuos, b'tchila pasuk rishon b'Torah. The original custom was that you would lay in, from the beginning of Ba'chodesh hashlishi, b'teiz nesam eretz Mitzrayim, right? V'yom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai. And then they would say Akdamus. That was the original minhag. They would read the first pasuk, and then they would say Akdamus. And the Taz is mafli on this. How are you allowed to be mafsik in the middle of the laning? And v'hiskim loymar, and the Taz agrees to Akdamus, koydem aschal pasuk rishon, v'koydem abracha kriyas haTorah. The Taz says it's preferable, and the correct method is to say the Akdamus before you begin to read from the Torah. And he says, really, Yetziv Pisgam, you should also say before you begin the Haftarah. You should say the Yetziv Pisgam, say Pisgam li'asugam, Yehoina son Gavarin v'son, and you say, Baruch Ador Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. But, says the Taz, Asher gam b'tzivus yom v'yom b'yom achar pasuk rishon Haftarah roi l'nokem l'shanois haminog. Really, you should change the minhag. In other words, the Taz changed the minhag. You say, how can you change a minhag? Answer, when it's wrong, you can change the minhag. So the Taz says it was wrong, so he changed it. What about the Haftarah? Says the Taz, Ela she'ein ha'Haftarah chamura kol kach. The Haftarah is not so chamur that you are not allowed to say a piyut after you've lain the first pasuk. But the question is, how do we understand the original custom of saying Akdamus in the Kriyas HaTorah and saying Yetziv Pisgam in the Haftarah, which we continue to do? Uve'emes hu peli, madua zeh hinhigu hakanmoinim l'shoirer Akdamus v'Yetziv Pisgam achar Kriyas pasuk rishon haloi davar. Okay. So says the father of Meir Shapiro, a very interesting insight. We know from many places in the Gemara, the original custom was that after the Kriyas HaTorah, after the reading of each pasuk, there was a Meturgaman. And the Meturgaman would translate the pasuk from the art scroll Aramaic, right? So they would read the Torah, and then somebody would read the Targum. How much of the Torah would they translate? Every single pasuk. Now you can imagine that's where the minhag of Kiddush clubs came from, because the Kriyas HaTorah lasted about twice as long, if not 3 times as long. But they probably didn't let the rabbi speak after that. Davening was much longer, right? Because you had each pasuk, you had a break, you had a pause after each pasuk, and you had a targum, break after each pasuk, and then you had a targum. Then, what about the Haftarah? They would be metargim the Haftarah as well. Now there's a difference in halacha between the Kriya and the Haftarah. By the Kriya, you're only allowed to read 1 pasuk at a time. By the Haftarah, the Gemara says in Megillah that you're allowed to do 3 psukim, because since there aren't halachas in the Haftarah, so we're allowed to read more in one shot. Okay. Now in those days, when they used to translate the Targum, there were still 2 times a year, as we're going to see, that there was an extra emphasis on reading the Targum. to the point where even when they stopped reading the Targum, they would still be Metargim the following 2 days of the year. Shavuos and Pesach. Shavuos l'kavod Matan Torah, and Pesach l'kavod the miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And therefore it is very likely that if they would be reading the Targum specifically on these Yom Tovim, before any good drasha, before any good speech, before anything, you need a good introduction. And that's what Akdamus was. Akdamus milim v'sharo yeshusa harmon shekilna, right? We're avla shekilna harmon yeshusa. We're saying Akdamus milin. This is introductory remarks. V'sharo yeshusa. I'm asking for permission. Meaning, before we begin to translate, we're asking permission from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the Tzibor, to be able to be metargim. Likewise, what is Yetziv Pisgam? Yetziv Pisgam is merely the Hakdama to the Targum that used to be read as a translation of the Haftarah. Okay, so now, why are we metargim the first day of Shavuos by the Kriya, and the second day of Shavuos by the Haftarah? Let us see. V'nira levar hakol. V'hu ki yadua me'ashas, the Chama Mekoimos, Umuva B'Tor, and the Shulchan Aruch and Sim Kuf Mem Hey. Then times of the Gemara, they would read the Torah, and they would be metargim. And the Koirei would read one pasuk, and the metargim would be metargim. And they would do this until they finished the whole Kriya, and they did the same for the Haftarahs. He brings in the brackets over here, that V'im ki b'Mishnah Megillah Daf Chav Gimel and Beis, we find that you don't read more than one pasuk, and the Navi 3, that means you're allowed to read 3, but you are certainly allowed to do one at a time. The reason you're allowed to read 3 is because if somebody would make a mistake, it wouldn't be an afkamina lamaisa lahalacha. Only in the Torah you're not to read more than one pasuk. Okay. Now, even in the Navi, we see in Tosis over there, he brings muchach, dehechi dechashina sheyiteh az, lo yikru gam benavi, rak pasuk pasuk. Tosis brings that if there was any concern, that if in the Navi the Metargim would make a mistake, the Metargim would not read more than one pasuk at a time. Even though from Tosfos it's mashma that the first 3 psukim of the Haftarah they would read in one shot for the Metorgaman, nevertheless it's muchach that it's better to read one pasuk at a time, because this way people don't get confused. However, he brings over here ulam. We're in the middle of the page. Atayin metargum klal. We don't do targum at all. Why? Yan shein anu mavinu b'lashon targum. We don't know what it's talking about. Kain kasav b'Torah b'Shulchan Aruch Hachem siman kuf mem hey. Look in Shulchan Aruch siman kuf mem hey. It's already gepaskin that we do not read the targum. V'ata acharei asher royim anachnu ki niskenu shnei apiyutim achashuv Akdamus zidib b'zlashon targum. If we see that there are 2 beautiful poems that were written, Akdamus and Yetziv Pisgam, and they were written in Aramaic, it's with all reasonable possibility, in all likelihood, these were composed at a time when the Targum was being read for Klal Yisrael. It's obviously, if we're reading a Piyut and Targum, it was probably composed at a time people understood it. Now, if they understood the Targum, then they were metargim each pasuk. Look in Tosfos and Megillah, Daf Chav Dalet Beis. They would be, that Tosfos says, in their times, they would specifically be metargim the Haftarah of Pesach and Shavuos, because it spoke about the Nisim, and it was a type of Persumei Nisa. Likewise, they would be metargim the Haftarah of Shavuos for Persumei Nisa. Likewise, the Bach also writes this. Then the times of the Tur, they only were metargim twice a year, Pesach and Shavuos. You hear this? In the times of the Tur, they only did Targum twice a year, Pesach and Shavuos. So therefore, if we see that there's this Piyut, Akdamus, and Yetziv Pisgam, and it's written in Targum, and then it was composed at a time people understood the Targum, so you could be sure that if there was any Targum that they would be translating, it would be Pesach and Shavuos. Therefore, says the father of Meir Shapiro, it is clear that what Akdamus is introductory Piyut to the reading of the Targum. It's an introduction to the reading of the Targum. He says, "V'lezen nira shetiknu Akdamus liyos kamay hakdamas lahametargaman terem yaskal targum segir shel kabbalas haTorah." Before the Metorgaman would translate the reading of the giving of the Torah, and ulechvoid kabbalas haTorah naser sadibros, the Metargim would sing in the beginning the Shir hanichbad of Akdamus, and he would sing it in Aramaic because that's the language people understood, so that people should understand it. Now, when did he sing it? Avada, he sang it in the middle of the Kriyas HaTorah. Because the same way, the Oila would make the bracha, and the Balkar would read the pasuk, and then the Matagim would be Matagim. Before the Matagim would be Matagim in the middle of the Kriya, they would say the Akdamus, the middle of the Kriya. Of course, the middle of the Kriya. The same way they would say the Aramaic in the middle of the Kriya, they sang the Akdamus in the middle of the Kriya. Because in those days, people understood the Targum, and it wasn't the Hefsik. The Hiskal Ashar Oisai, Achar Kriyas Pasuk Rishon, Koidem Shehiskal Hula Targum Oisai. And they did the same thing with Yetziv Pisgam. How could they sing Yetziv Pisgam in the middle of the Haftarah? How could they be Matargim in the middle of the Haftarah? It's because people understood it, so it wasn't a hefsek. So the same way the Targum wasn't a hefsek, the Shir Hakdama wasn't a hefsek either. V'chein asu gam b'yetziv piskam asher tiknu l'chavoid ha'haftarah ha'chashuva shemedaberes gam kein mikabal satorah. So we say it as a hakdama to the reading of the first day of Shavuos, which is a reading about the giving of the Torah, and we say it as a hakdama to the haftarah of the second day of Shavuos, which is also about the giving of the Torah. What does the haftarah talk about on the second day of Shavuos? We say, Hashem shamati shemacha yareisi. And what's the next pasuk? Eloi ah miteiman yavai. Now this is a very important word. It's the name of Hashem. Eloi ah. Eloi. Now there are three things you need to know about this word. Number one, it's a milel. So it's not Eloi and then ah. It's Eloi ah. So the focus is on the first part of the word. Second is, it's not Eloi and then Ha. Eloi and then Ha is an advertisement of complete Amaratzos. You know, there's a song called Ma'isor. Ma'isor Yeshu Asi L'chana El Shabei Cha Tikain Beis Tefilasi V'sham Toida Nizabeicha V'yestachin Ma'beicha Mitzor Hamna Beicha. If somebody would say that, you know, I don't know what. They never learned how to read Hebrew. Because everybody knows that when there's a patach under a ches at the end of a word, it's not cha, like every other letter in Hebrew. There's a rule that by ches at the end of the word with a patach, you first pronounce the patach and then the letter. Same thing with the letter hey. There's no such thing Eloi and then ha. If you say Eloi and ha, unlikely if you're Yotzei Hallel. To say Hallel Shalom, you need to say every word. So you didn't say Hashem's name. That's not God's name. It's Eloi and then ah. And the third thing is, it's a ma'apekeh. But the ma'apekeh is not ma'akev. But what is ma'akev? And the milel, you should try to do. But you have to say the name. You know, you can't... First it makes a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. They're not making a bracha. So the same way Elokeinu is not God's name, Eloi and then Ha is not Hashem's name either. It's Ah. Bishmet Gavai Ah. But whatever you make out the check to will be cashed, right? But in Hallel, it won't necessarily work. Okay, so...
what about
Elikenu?
People say Elikenu.
Elikenu?
Ever heard that?
People say Ad Hashem. It's also not Hashem's name. Okay, so that's the deal. We say Eloi and then A Miteiman Yavai. So it's about the giving of the Torah on the second day of Shavuos. So we say like this. Kara ha-maftir betchila pasuk harishain benavi. So first, the maftir reads the pasuk rishain. And then, before the matargim begins to be matargim, the first pasuk, they would sing Yetziv Pisgam. So now we understand what Akdamus and Yetziv Pisgam is. Akdamus is a shir hakdama to the laning of the first day of Shavuos, and Yetziv Pisgam is the hakdama to the targum of the haftarah, the second day of Shavuos. So what happened to them? What happened to them is very simple. I don't know about you, but I don't understand Targum anymore. And neither does the majority of Klal Yisrael. Maybe a little bit we understand. But we don't understand, it's not the vernacular the way it once was. And therefore, the Taz says, you need to move Akdamos, and because anyway we're not saying the Targum. If we're not saying the Targum, then the Hakdama is really, just a relic. So it's a relic, so we're going to advance it before the Kriya. So that's why the Taz says we're no longer authorized to say Akdamus as part of the Kriya. Yetziv Pisgam. So the Taz says, really, we should also move Yetziv Pisgam. Elamai, it's only the Haftarah. So look for the Haftarah. You should try to get a klaf. Otherwise, you have to read it along with the Balkairei. But of course, you could ask Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Every shul should have a klaf for the Haftarah. You ask Reb Chaim, but we can't afford it. So go collect money. Anyway. there are a lot of shuls, a lot of the yeshivas have a klaf, but it's for sure l'chadchila to have a klaf for the haftarah. But still, it's not as chamor as the regular kriya, and therefore hanach lohem li Yisrael, that we allow them to continue to say Yetziv Pisgam after the first pasuk. So now we still have one more question. Let's see a little bit further. L'chein ta'ana Taz, neged minhag hakadam. So the Taz says, v'hiskam l'shar akdamus koydem ha'kriya shel pasuk rishayin, l'man lo yeh hefsek be'emtze kriyas ha'torah. V'rak b'piyat Yetziv Pisgam, hiniach ha'minhag hakadam ba'od shoyim etargem yan ki eina hefsek ha'torah chomer kol kach, l'chein lo yirotz l'shanis minhag hakadam. V'lazeh efshar lo yimatam. This is mamish beautiful. Why is there only a piyut for the first day of the kriya and the second day of the haftarah? Well, the first day of the kriya is Parsha, why there's a hakdama. Because the first day kriya is one of the most important lanings of the year. It's to commemorate Kabbalah HaTorah. It's one of the most important kriyas HaTorah of the whole year. You know, this is a reenactment of Maimon Har Sinai. The Rabbi Yashuv would say that a person should listen very carefully to the kriya on the first day of Shavuos, because we know at Kabbalah HaTorah, Hashem was merape all the chaylim. So as we read the Torah again on the first day of Shavuos, and we reenact Maimon Har Sinai, it's a great kayach of refuah for Klal Yisrael. But the second day is an important laning, like every laning is important, but we don't lane in Eretz Yisrael, and it's only Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galius. It wasn't as chashav a kriya, and therefore they certainly were once matargim it, but it didn't warrant its own special shir hakdama. And what about the haftarah? Well, the haftarah, the second day, talks about the giving of the Torah. Well, what's wrong with the haftarah the first day? The haftarah, what do we lane on the first day of Shavuos? Yechezkel, the Ma'aseh Merkava. The Ma'aseh Merkava, they never were matargim the Ma'aseh Merkava in the first place. So if they never even matargim it, they never wrote a shir hakdama for it, says the father of Meir Shapiro. The shir hakdama was a hakdama for the Targum, but the Gemara says Chagiga, they never read the Targum of the first day of Shavuos. In fact, the Gemara in Chagiga says there was a Talmud who was reading the Haftarah of the first day of Shavuos, and he was reading about the Chashmal, and he activated the Chashmal, and the fire came down, and they wanted to bury Sefer Yechezkel. You think they would ever be Matargim Sefer Yechezkel? They weren't Matargim the first day of Shavuos. The Haftarah. V'lazeh, what?
Haftarahs were only instituted after they had Gzerah, and not to lane.
Right, that's according...
What year was that? Because...
I think in the times of Hanukkah.
Only.
I think, but not all Rishonim agree to that. That's the normative view, that the Haftarah was in response to the bittul of the laning. But other Rishonim say it was a separate. It was a takana. It wasn't in response to the bittul of the laning. So he says like this: V'zev shalom atam shaloi tikna apir shel Yetziv Pisgam apir acher b'Haftarah shel Yom Aleph T'Shavuos im ki gam hi Haftarah chashuva ma'od. The Haftarah, the first day, is a very chashuv Haftarah. Ma'aseh Merkava. Ki kafiyah nireh lo yoy matargimin l'Ma'aseh Merkava. The reason is they were never matargim the Ma'aseh Merkava. Ki gam ala kriya b'Navi, even regarding reading in the Navi, Amru b'Mishnah Megillah Daf Chafayim and Aleph, ein maftirim b'mer. There's even a sheet that you're not to read the psukim. Rabbi Yehuda mater. So we hold like Rabbi Yehuda, and it's brought in the Gemara Megillah. And there, the Gemara Megillah says, Maftir b'merkava. But Avada, we're not matargim it, because there's a sheet that we don't even read the psukim. Avol nira levetar shloya matargim b'merkava, l'ratzu shavina ha'maynam klal b'zeh. Like Chazal saying in Chagiga, v'loy b'merkava b'yachid, unless you're chacham midaitai. And he brings down the story in Chagiga, there's a Maisa of a Talmud that was reading Sefer Yechezkel, and he understood the Chashmal, and the fire came out, and he burnt him, and they want to be going as Yechezkel. But it's clear they were never matargim the Haftarah the first day of Shavuos. Marv Rabbi Isai, who wrote the Targum on the Chumash? On the Chumash. Uncle Sagar. Uncle Sagar, who wrote the Targum on the Nevi'im? Yonasan ben Uziel. Yonasan ben Uziel never wrote a Targum on the Chumash. I have a Chumash at home, it says Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. The printer's fooled you. It's Targum Yishalmi. Yonasan ben Uziel never wrote Targum on the Chumash. The Chidah writes about it, Maratz writes about it. It's everybody agrees to this. It's not a Chiddush even. Targum Yonasan ben Uziel is only on Navi. He wanted to write on Ksuvim, but because Sefer Daniel's in Ksuvim, and he couldn't be Megala when Mashiach is coming. But Yonasan ben Uziel revealed the Targum on Navi. And the Gemara says in Megillah Daf Gimel, that when Yonasan ben Uziel got up to reveal the Targum, Eretz Yisrael quakes 400 amos by 400 amos. And the Basko came out and said, Mi gila razel abanai. And Yonasan ben Uziel stood up on his feet and he said, Loi l'chvoidi asisav loi l'chvoid beis avi abba, ela l'chvoidcha asisi Shalei Tarba Machlekes B'Yisrael. So what do we see from here? There was a man by the name of Yonasan ben Uziel. And what character trait did he have? He was a big anav. He didn't do anything for his own promotion. He did everything. Shalei Tarba Machlekes B'Yisrael. So since Yetziv Pisgam is a hakdama for the Targum on Chavakuk, and who wrote the Targum on Chavakuk? Yonasan ben Uziel. So as we're about to read the Targum on Chavakuk, we say, Yehoinasan Gevarin V'san V'chein Namtilei Apirin. We give a little shkoyach to Yonasan ben Uziel. We say, because you were humble, you were able to reveal this Targum, and therefore we give you a shkoyach, even though we don't read the Targum anymore, but we still preserve the Shir Hakdama. V'nei HaMetargim Oz B'Torah Hay Metargim Es HaTargum Shel Onkos Hager. V'Hametargim Enavi Hay Metargim Shel Yonasan ben Uziel. Kamavor B'Gemar Megillah Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. And the Gemara says, Yonasan ben Uziel stood up on his feet and he said, we see that Yonasan ben Uziel was an Anav. And therefore, before we begin to be Matargim L'Haftarah, the second day of Shavuos, which was established by Yonasan ben Uziel, we are Meshabeach Yonasan ben Uziel, Yonasan, referring to Yonasan ben Uziel, Gevar Invisan, was Mechaber, the Targum, Laman HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Chen Namti Le'apirin, we wish him Chen from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is, according to the father of Meir Shapiro, the side of Akdamus and the side of Yetziv Pisgam. Baruch Tia, don't go anywhere. Okay.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.